So let's get to what my real concern about this is, especially today, is that this has to do with the Megaport project and the default on the Megaport project. See, when the United States, under the helm of Barack Obama, decided they were going to chastise Russia for being a very bad girl, there were certain ways that Russia was supposed to demonstrate her loyalty. And for whatever reason, that Russia actually explained very literally and lucidly, this was not acceptable. And when Russia said, you know what, we don't like this arrangement, we're not going to continue, then all of a sudden, well, if you don't like the arrangement we've given you and you don't want to continue on our terms, then we're not going to let you have access to any due process in our courts. You have no redress legally. Now, there were other countries involved, and they said, well, okay, but Russia will have redress in our courts. And we have treaties and relationships with the Americans. Then things happen as they happen. Sanctions, allowing for Russia to invest, but not allowing for Russia to get any returns on those investments. Right? Then we have the Megaport. It's supposed to be a global commitment. This understanding of providing for port safety. This includes a variety of things. This concept of the Megaport initiative is identifying specific kinds of megaports. One of those things has to do with virtual identification and possibilities, i.e., you've got a megaport or you've got a number of ports that have this megaport designation. You get an alert that there is a terrorist attack pending that intends to target a particular area. You can effectuate a structure and a means by which you can shut down that area or take a particular kind of action regarding the area of concern. And then the megaport system allows for some sort of integration with another port that might be vulnerable or another port that might have a threat in connection with it, so that then they can remotely monitor the situation and provide external support if necessary. Sounds very sensible. Sounds very, very sophisticated. Sounds like the kind of thing you don't allow petty politicking in regards to, but also the kind of thing you're going to need people that are competent and capable of delivering, literally being able to deliver. And you need necessarily high standards somehow. Well, it's just not economically viable. We've decided to go for the second line of support. What's the second line of support? Handheld low-level radioactivity detectors. Well, they're not going to, try to smuggle it through the megaport. That's not the point. The point behind the megaport was not about a specific fixed geographic location any more than the handheld low-level radioactivity detectors were. It also had to do with a change to things like bundling for payments to Medicare, didn't it? All kinds of things got a lot more specific when it came to the actual diagnostics. But when it came to the bundle that was allowed to be put together in order to clear, the bundle became bigger quantitatively, especially if you're talking about numerical data. But the standards relating it qualitatively changed. We're not raising the water level, and we're not draining the swamp. We're not elevating anybody. That wasn't the intent. You turned it into a big bog, and you hope that in the frenzy that when you start running over people and they get sucked into the mud, that, well, they just don't surface. And once they suffocate, people will stop asking. And these things happen concurrently. And that's exactly where we're at right now. And it's because of the default on the Megaport that the material conditions were allowed to be put into effect to accomplish COVID-19. There was already a premeditated attack planned for China to launch a biological weapon specifically targeting people of Han Chinese genotype. This has been in development actively and being considered for deployment as a biological weapon at least as recently as July of 2018. They were planning to engage various aspects of it in Africa And then once they had created certain conditions in Africa to deploy it through the actual maritime port system into China with an understanding that it would be dormant for a while and that at a particular time in the future it would be activated in order to begin the process of proliferation. This was known in 2018, July of 2018. I believe it's one of the reasons my ass got kicked out of where I was living, and I had to come back to Dallas and be on the streets for a year and a half. And while you've had me squirreled away in here, where not anybody fucking talks to me like I'm a fucking human being, because you know absolutely goddamn fucking well, 100 fucking percent that the Texas petrochem sector has been involved with a eugenicist and genocidal biological weapons paradigm actively since the 1980s that they intended to test in the Middle East and then use North Africa as the jumping off point for deployment. You already fucking know that. So all of this other stuff is just the workup. The workup. So that's what happened there. I don't know the specifics of how it ended up getting activated in China, but it got activated in the United States because those goddamn fucking metal detectors you had at those airports were provided by technology associated with the people who specifically manufactured the actual fucking weapon that you deployed to China. And that goes all the way back to why I got busted down in 2008. So all the shit about Shira, that's not my fucking problem. All the shit about the girls, that is just extortion. Here's the cold hard fact of the matter is, if I had known what they were up to, I would never have agreed. And I would have called the FBI on them. A. B. Once I got there, they made it very fucking clear that what I had to offer was nothing they wanted any part of. What they wanted was for me to launder money. I didn't understand it on that level at the time. But other than that, there were other things that I had as part of my fucking life that they weren't even interested in. They weren't interested in me as a journalist. They weren't interested in me as an editor. They weren't interested in me for any of the public speaking I had done in connection with what I had worked on before I got sucked into whatever the fuck you thought you were going to justify, whatever the fuck they thought they were doing. Before any of that happened, I had another life, I had another skill set, I had another way of being, and that's how I found that stuff during the 2008 election. That's how I found the stuff in the appropriations bill. That's how I found the stuff in the DREAM Act. That's how I found the stuff in the publicly accessible records at the time that went into that damn press release. So get to the fucking point. You guys created a deal specifically with Israel. Then you trafficked my ass to California so that the people in California could torture me while they also used me as a human test subject for development of, among other things, directed energy weapons. And they also used information connected to me and what I was associated with while I was on site in California to install those goddamn airport detectors. And they used those airport detectors to activate COVID-19 in the United States. You're going to have to fucking deal with that. That's what you need to deal with today. All this other little shit about pedophiles trying to sex terrorize people, it's gone too fucking far. There's absolutely nothing relevant to bringing up the shit with whoever's name you want to put on it. If there was anything legitimate about actual acquisition of human capital, I've already identified it. I was taught about appropriate procedure regarding testing for tuberculosis and other sorts of tests that one would have to get in order to get a job in public health. I learned about various things having to do with what would be legitimate considerations of actually transmitted diseases. I learned about patient health records and what was considered to be acceptable in terms of on-site access. I learned about what it meant to be involved with administering a business, including a nonprofit business, on-site at a place that had meters as part of the payment of utilities. These are all practical things that are actually things I did. All the other stuff about the political agenda, it sounds like what you're trying to do is extort people into acceding to, relenting on, prosecuting acts of terrorism. It's a terrorist act when you use the port system. It's a terrorist act when you use an airport to transfer biological weapons. And it doesn't fucking matter if you're in Congress. And it doesn't fucking matter if you're in the state legislature. And it sure as fuck doesn't matter if you kept your mouth shut long enough to get a job in the actual fucking agency ex post fucking facto. Especially if you know how it can happen, who did it, and why they did it.